Welcome back, Year 12s, to another video. Okay, so today's topic, we're looking at the third line of defense, but firstly, in our quick recap here, we should be looking at these cells and we should be aware of what most of them are here. Okay, the only one we hadn't referenced is the monocyte there, and that there is an undifferentiated white blood cell. So it will turn into one of these at some point. All right, again, we should be aware of what our MHC 1 and 2 markers are. I've had students struggle with this in the past. So MHC 1 markers found on all of your cells that have a nucleus, all right, and it differentiates self from non-self. MHC 2 markers found on only specific special cells, all right, known as macrophages, dendritic cells, and B lymphocytes. And of course, they are our antigen-presenting cells. All right, so the third line of defense, adaptive immunity. That's what we're looking at today. So again, we're going to look at lymphocytes, antibodies, memory cells, and a few other bits and pieces too. All right, so the third line of defense is also known as the adaptive immune system, or the specific immune response. All right, so adaptive meaning that it changes, it can adapt to something. So how's it started? It's initiated by the presentation of non-self antigens to specific immune cells. Okay, so you have some sort of antigen that's found on a pathogen, okay, and that's going to stimulate our antigen-presenting cells, our APCs, to bring those to other immune cells, which will then create the actual immune response we're looking at today. So what's important about the adaptive immune system? Firstly, the specificity of it. All right, so it's specific. It's unique and tailored to each and every antigen found on the pathogens. What else is unique? It has memory. All right, so once it's seen a pathogen before, and therefore the specific antigen of that pathogen, it can create memory for that, and therefore have a much stronger immune response the next time. So when it goes to attack or eradicate a previously encountered pathogen, it will be super quick and effective. Okay. So the first time it interacts with it, it's pretty poor, slow, but it will eventually get rid of it, and then it creates the memory, which then makes it extremely potent and volatile. What else is really important with the adaptive immune system, or the third line of defense, is the lymphatic system. All right, so you may have seen this before. All right, it's a bunch of these, really they're vein-like, but they're actually different types of tubes that contain different things. So what are the roles of the lymphatic system? All right, absorbing free fatty acids and glycerol in the digestive system. Okay, so as you can see, there's quite a few here near that small intestine area. Okay, and that's where your fats will be absorbed, of course. And so that is essentially the fluid within them. Okay, but something to note here with the lymphatic system is that there's no pump. All right, no pump. So how does the lymph move? Okay, that's a question we're going to have to ask ourselves. All right, what about the lymphatic system? What else? A place where lymphocytes mature. All right, so within the lymph nodes, lymphocytes will mature. They also transport lymphocytes and antigen-presenting cells to lymph nodes. Okay, so what's important here is if we break down the word like we always do, we have lymphocyte. Okay, so again, lymph meaning part of the lymphatic system, all right, and then oocyte meaning cell part of the lymphatic system. Alrighty, and this is where your adaptive immune response will occur. This is where the third line of defense happens, in the lymphatic system. Okay, so super important. I can't stress enough how important the lymphatic system is for the third line of defense here. All right, and we refer to different parts of it in a few different ways. Okay, so you have the lymphatic vessels, which is all around. You have the actual lymph itself, which is like that fatty liquid, which is inside of it. And then you have the lymph nodes, the individual clustered circles there that you can see. And they're in different parts of your body. They're in your neck, armpit, groins, hips, and the middle there. Okay, so that's where you'll find them. So again, you can see stuff like this here shown in the image. All right, this I believe it's a woman. This woman here has an extremely swollen neck, which you can think of when you go to the doctors and you say you're feeling sick. You say you got the flu. What do they check first? They check your neck, because that's where there's a lot of lymph nodes. All right, and those lymph nodes will be swollen if you are sick. And that's obviously because the immune system's having a response. So there's lots of things going on in here. So invading pathogens are transported in the lymph to the lymph nodes. So essentially the lymph and lymphatic vessels are just the highway bringing it to the city, which is the lymph nodes. Lymphocytes obviously can travel through there, and phagocytes can travel through there too. Okay, specifically the APCs we've talked about. All right. And they will swell up when you have an infection. All right? I like to say there's a big party happening in the lymphs because there's lots of different immune cells there, and they're swelling up. Alrighty. So what are the main cell types we're looking at here? Okay, so in this, there's a few different things here, but what are we really looking at? The two most important here are going to be, of course, your B lymphocytes here. All right, super important. And then your T lymphocytes here. Okay, and they both essentially differentiate into different things. So if we look at the T lymphocytes first, you have the cytotoxic T cell. All right, not to be confused with natural killer cells, which a lot of people do. You have your T helper cell, which is probably the most important cell in the whole entire response. And then, of course, just T memory cells. All right, so T memory cells. Alrighty. Whereas with the B lymphocytes, all right, or B cells, there's only two important things here: plasma cells, which help create antibodies, which we'll talk about later, and then the memory cells, of course. So that's going to be your B memory cells to differentiate them from the T memory cells. Okay. So these are super important cells you need to be aware of. Okay. So this is an introduction to it. So get it in your head. T cell equals T lymphocyte. B cell equals B lymphocyte. And then they differentiate into multiple different things. The cytotoxic T cell, the helper T cell, or T helper cell, the memory T cell, and then, of course, the plasma cell and the memory B cell. So plenty of names to remember here. All right, let's start on antigen presentation now. So what is antigen presentation? We've heard about antigen presenting cells, so APCs. So obviously this is what they do. This is why they're special. So what is antigen presentation? It's a key process in the initiation of the adaptive immune response. So it initiates, and that is truly the important part here. It initiates the response. All right, so the selection of a type of T lymphocyte called a helper T cell via a process called antigen presentation occurs. Okay, sure. Previously engulfed or destroyed pathogens are presented with one of their antigens. All right, so if we look at this cell A here, this could be a macrophage, for example. So it's a large phagocyte that goes around eating foreign things. So it's found some sort of pathogen here, and then it's found an antigen, as you can see here, foreign antigen. And those antigens will be in here. And then what it does is, because it's a special cell, it will move it onto its MHC2 marker and will present it, just like me holding up, holding up a sign. It's presenting something. Okay. So what happens in here is that presented antigen will then find its corresponding T helper cell. So this T helper cell will be specific to unlock, well, unlock I guess is the wrong word, but to, to stimulate the T helper cell, okay, which will then cause other things to occur. That'll release some sort of other substance, boom, and then that will go to other places and stimulate other cells as well. Okay, so this does get a little bit complex, especially in the next video, but it is something super important to understand here. All right, after this process, they travel via the lymphatic system to the lymph nodes. Okay, so again, this is the antigen presenting cell. So the macrophage, it's presenting some sort of antigen. It's finding the T helper cell within the lymphatic system. Okay, using that MHC2 marker as its presentation. These then interact with complementary T cell receptors, which are the orange part here, T cell receptors found on the T cell itself. Okay, T helper cell. And that will stimulate something else further. Alrighty, an interaction occurs between the B lymphocyte and the T helper cell. It is then activated and is said to be selected. Alright, and from here there's two different responses that occur. Two different responses. Alright, I don't like the shape of that too, so I'm going to draw it again. Two different responses. Okay, it can go two different ways from here. Alright, and that's what you need to be aware of. They happen at the same time. The same thing is occurring, except it's a slightly different response with different immune cells on either side. Okay? But the ultimate goal is to destroy the pathogen of which that antigen was found on and destroy them all. And that's what the body will do. Okay? And we call those two the cell-mediated immune response and the humoral immune response. They're the two different ways that this can go. Okay? Appropriately color-coded there. Again, we're going to go through this again in the next video too. And we'll go through individual immune responses. Okay? But these are really important to be aware of at this point. Yeah, this is, I would say, one of the harder topics throughout biology. So if you need to rewatch the video, please rewatch it. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Good luck.